Around the world, democracy and the rule of law are under siege. Not since the end of the Second World War have liberal systems and governments faced such widespread and coordinated pressure. Today, we're witnessing the rise of strongmen, the weakening of institutions, and growing disillusionment with democratic forms. From protectionist policies that limit cooperation to libertarian movements that question the role of the state, and of course, kleptocratic regimes that erode accountability from within. There's multiple and often conflicting forces that are reshaping the global political landscape, and these are tendencies that don't always align, but together they are truly pushing democracy into a breaking point. So today in War Diplomacy, we're going to talk about the global state of democracy and what's fueling this decline, how these changes are being manifested across the different regions, and most importantly, whether democracy can still fight back. Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of our podcast, War Diplomacy, your trusted podcast on international relations. My name is Fabio Almada, talking to you from Brussels once again. And today we're diving into a really crucial and insightful topic, which is, of course, Donald Trump's effect on global democratic and governance norms. And what are the forces behind these trends? And to help us to unpack these critical questions, we're joined today by someone that has witnessed this democratic backsliding firsthand, Luis Villaherrera. And Luis has not only observed the erosion of institutions in Latin America, but he has also taken an active role to push back against these threats. So Luis, welcome, bienvenido to the show. How are you today?
Thank you, Fabio. Thank you for having me. And I think you should put like a cue of dramatic telenovela music, because what we are talking about today, it's very interesting, not just in the Western Hemisphere, but in the whole world. So yeah, thank you for having me.
No, it's our pleasure. And for those that do not know Luis, he's a first Obama Fellow from the Mexico Central America region. He was as well a finalist for the Kofi Annan Prize. He considers himself a tech innovator that empowers citizens through civic engagement tools, as well as an expert in combating disinformation and misinformation. And he has collaborated with global institutions to strengthen democracy. And he's currently focused more on this ethical use of AI and emerging markets to bridge that gap between the private sector, AI governance for tech-driven social impact. So, Luis, I think that we definitely have the right guest for this really insightful topic. And just as you've said, a bit dramatic, but it's the threat that the world is facing. And this is what we like to talk in War Diplomacy. So thanks a lot for joining us. The privilege is all ours. But Luis, before we dive into the first block, just to give our listeners a picture of what we're going to discuss, in the first block, we're going to talk about this democratic backsliding with a particular focus on Latin America, the U.S., and in this case, Turkey, which also has seen some democratic backsliding in the last years. Then we're going to go a bit more insight into how technology is being used as both a tool for authoritarian control, for surveillance and censorship, but as well how these are tools that can help democracies thrive as well. And at the end, we're going to end with a better note and try to see how democracy can still have a future, how we can still defend these systems. But even before we dive into the first block, just a brief thank you to everyone that listens and tunes into War Diplomacy. This means a lot to us. As many of you know, this is a project for the love of art, and we truly appreciate if you could leave a comment, if you can leave a rating here at Spotify, or interact with our content in any way whatsoever. We truly appreciate it. So Luis, without further ado, let's go into that first block and talk about democratic erosion in our loved Latin America, but as well in other regions in the world. All right, so Luis, going into this first block and just talking about the global state of democracy and this erosion we've seen lately, what's your thought? Why do you think there's this democratic backsliding all over the world?
To be honest, Latin America is rediscovering its love for strong men. And that's kind of funny because like we can do like recipes in different countries. In El Salvador, for example, we have this beloved president with almost 90% of approval, not just in El Salvador, but worldwide. But with that, we also have like 3% of the population in jail. I think it's a very hard and mixed opinions about what is happening there, because other countries in Latin America are trying to adapt the same model as the one that is happening in El Salvador. We can see, for example, in Ecuador, where presidents now campaign behind bulletproof glass because one got killed. And the security crisis brings that sentiment in the population, in the citizens, to say like, okay, maybe the model in El Salvador we can use the same one, even though it's a strong man, is like authoritarian or wannabe authoritarian. We also have Nicaragua, for example. Nothing is happening there because you have the same people, the same family in power. And yeah, it's like 90s dictatorship reboot, and it's still happening. It's still there. The international community is not doing anything. You just need to basically jail priests, exile artists, and there's no one left to oppose me. That's the lemma of Ortega, maybe. The constitution, you can rewrite it the times that you want. I think it's wild that we're talking about that because no one is doing anything in Nicaragua, for example. And they have been in this situation for many years now. And then we can talk about Maduro, for example. Maduro it was like the next in line to the throne, and he still has the power, even though he managed the constitution. He managed every political power in Venezuela. The people, for example, in Venezuela, people want change. But that doesn't matter at the end of the day because they are still have him there, and the international community is not doing enough to push for more sanctions, for more measures that can help to bring human rights back. I think it's like really hard to talk about Maduro, Ortega, because that's the reality that we're living in Latin America, and people are fine with that. Now we can see a different way to rule, in which people like presidents and governments, they are using disinformation and misinformation campaigns to spread what they want. And you can see that all over the region. People believe in that. And the reality in Latin America right now is that you have different chefs, for example, is the presidents. They are putting the recipe in their own way, in their own making, and they are trying to export them for other countries to do the same. Because at the end of the day, for example, in El Salvador, you have President Bukele, who is very loved, and that's a reality that I cannot hide and no one can hide. People love him because he took the biggest problem in El Salvador, that was security, and fix it. But at the end, the cause of that is that the rule of law is weak. But you see other countries in Ecuador, in Peru, in even Venezuela, Colombia, people want a Bukele there.
I agree. I mean, talking from my experience in Mexico, I listened to that argument so many times that maybe that model should be replicated, not just in El Salvador, but in Mexico as well, and in every other Latin American country, which in principle, you listen to the results and you could say, yeah, I mean, it's true. It's true that crime has gone down, but I like what you said, not to what cost. And when you go down that path of eroding all the checks and balances for executive power, it might be the gangs that go down now, but in a couple of years, it might be the press, it might be the opposition. And I don't think that's a sustainable way to go forward. But it's true that in generally people are happy with the short-term results, but it's true that maybe long-term effect on the system, on the institutions is not taken into consideration. I think that this is not something that's isolated to Latin America, right? I mean, lately we've seen this all over the world. Another country that maybe we could focus a bit, because I know you have also some experience in there, it's the US. And no one would have thought that it would happen there, democratic backsliding in the US. But lately, the trend tendency is clear. I mean, the way that Elon Musk and Donald Trump have fought the judicial power in these last weeks, as they have put some challenges and some troubles into their really aggressive agenda against their civil servants, with all these executive orders regarding migrants. And I guess that we're going to start to see maybe, I don't even know, do you think that maybe they will not be listening to the judges, and then we will actually see two parts of the government fighting, directly fighting against each other?
I mean, to be honest, he's following like the path of Bukele. It's very similar if you see the timeline when Bukele basically removed the Supreme Court judges to make his bid, for example. I think it's very interesting how Trump is doing almost the same. For example, ruling by executive order over passing the Congress. One of the common things that I found, like seeing the what is happening there versus what is happening in El Salvador, and also like in other Latin American countries, is that people either they don't care or they agree with what he's saying, and they use media to share some news that some of them can be real. For example, one of the main things in the States is that migrants that are violent, they are killing, they are raping, and until a certain point, that can be true. Like one person, that can be a very isolated crime, for example, but they explode that and show in every communication channel, in every newspaper, and people read that and they are afraid. So when the President Trump came and said like, okay, we are going to take every gang member, every migrant who is doing crime, and we're going to deport them to the jail in El Salvador, you know, that tracks, and people believe in that, and people support that. So I think it's very hard to fight that because, for example, the Democrats and other civil society organizations, they are not doing their job in the sense that they are not connecting a good message. Democrats could fight migration because there are some ways that you can obtain your path to citizenship, residency, whatever you want. But I think they should be more practical in the sense that they can deliver a message that people connect with because they are not connecting with people. Whereas Trump, he is connecting with people. And when you read all of these headlines, oh yeah, this migrant killed 2 girls, uh, for sure you're going to be afraid. So I think they use that as a way to push for what they want. So when they are dismantling the education system department, people are is like, okay, because they are going to help and the country is going to be better. So I think those narratives really push for something that people in their mind thinks that is true. So I think the nuance there and also like playing devil's advocate can help people from the other side to understand what is happening. Because yeah, there's no connection with Democrats, for example, and that's why everything that is happening because people think that what he's doing is okay and it's fixing America to make America
Definitely.
great again.
Definitely, yeah. And at the end, I guess that the digital age creates silos of and echo chambers of people that support each other's tendencies without even to be able to contrast opinions, right? And it just amplifies that message. That algorithm amplifies the content that you engage with. And well, since the acquiral of Twitter by Elon Musk, by X, it's exactly the same times 1,000, right? Like you cannot enter the platform without seeing messages in a particular way, in a particular side of the political spectrum, right? And I guess now with the rest of the digital of the digital lords in the same aisle, it may be similar in all the other platforms. And I agree with what you say. As long as the narrative, as long as you own the narrative and you have an angle and you push it in TV, you push it in social media, people will follow it. I mean, if you have a big electoral base and they believe in your message, facts will matter little, right? And in today's age, the age of misinformation, you bombard people with 10 different sources, and they will. It's not about that they will know that it's a lie. It's just you cannot tell lies from truths anymore. And today with AI and yeah, you said it before with deep fakes and AI enhancing images, it's going to be even harder as time goes by. And lately, I mean, the biggest, to me, the biggest news this week was the tariffs and the fact that a lot of Trump followers do agree that it's something in the benefit of the U.S. when you clearly see that markets are going the other way. I mean, who knows? Maybe you need a really drastic medicine in order to de-risk the U.S. from China's economic potential coercion might be. I don't think this is the way forward. I mean, I think we're in the phase of a commercial war. I mean, not even in the edge. I think that we just started a new era in an economic new economic era. So let's see how it goes. But the way that people react to that, the fight that you see online, it's crazy, huh?
And just like a brief story, I did a road trip after I finished my program at Columbia. So we did like a road trip from New York to LA. It was really interesting to talk with some people. One time we were taking an Uber, I think it was Dallas, and the Uber driver, like, he didn't know about other candidates besides Trump. He was just Trump. And he was like, no, but he's defending our interest. Like, he's giving money, like he's a businessman. So the idea that you put into the people's mind, that stick. And it's very hard to take away that part from them. We are like so polarized that if I think this, I cannot be friends with someone who really doesn't think that way. And I think that's the reality that is happening now. And because of like Trump has a very big network in sense of media reach, people are repeating the same speech. Yeah, Democrats, they are crazy. They are doing this, they're doing that. And yeah, I think that in the long run is going to affect every American citizens, even though they don't understand right now. Because if you want to take like the data about how much money migrants pay to the IRS, it's huge. It's really huge. So that helps to all the social benefits that the US have. I think at least maybe the European Union is going to stick together. You can see also Shane Bond in Mexico. I think she's heading to the CELAC in a few days. So maybe that she can be a leader, because a lot of people are seeing her as a leader of the region, who can unify some countries at least to fight some of the tariff in this economic warfare that is happening right now. So I think,
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, let's see. I had a really interesting discussion with a friend we have in common with Santiago Barrail in the Spanish version of the podcast, and he mentioned how we might be moving into the age of my country first mentality, not just America first, but every country, every leader thinking about their interests before everything else, before international cooperation. And you mentioned the EU, which in principle it's this supranational entity, but when every country is pulling to its own side, that consensus might break. Yeah, and we see it with the recent developments in Ukraine, how different countries think in different directions. So that means that you cannot really find a way forward, and have the feeling like in the coming months, in the coming years, it might be the case with every single subject we deal with. I hope that Latin America, our region, does at least find some sort of unified voice. But again, I feel like there's a clear ideological division, and Mexico is way too in the north, Brazil is way too big, and they speak different language. So it's hard to find that regional that regional leader, right? Like at least in our region, I think it's a bit complicated. I think that we need one. I mean, there has to be a way for our leaders to push a unified message, or we will be divided and conquered, like we've been before. But Luis, going back into this topic of the first block, I wanted to introduce the concept of competitive authoritarianism, which is really interesting. I was reading about it lately, and it's a system where even though elections still take place, the party in power or the leader in power takes advantage of the state and its power to gain unfair advantages over opposition. So even though that there is this shell of democracy, like multi-party elections, there is no fundamental fairness and integrity for a real, true democratic competition, as these leaders manipulate the system through, I don't know, the state media, the economy, or literally rigging the game while maintaining this democratic facade. And this is something we see in Hungary, in Turkey, in India, Tunisia, and in historical cases in Latin America, such as in Fujimori's Peru, and as you've mentioned, in Venezuela with Chavez and Maduro, right? So this concept of competitive authoritarianism, I think it's something that now many Americans might even be thinking about. And I wanted to mention, Luis, this example we had in Turkey last weeks of President Erdogan jailing the leader of the opposition, the mayor of Istanbul. And I think that's the clearest example of a country that's going further into that path of authoritarianism. Erdogan has been in power for for more than 20 years. And the institutions of Turkey are definitely being eroded to the ground. Of course, that this geopolitical era that we're living in it allows him to do this, as the EU has other issues more critical on its other border. The US is also has a priority somewhere else, so it allows Erdogan even more freedom of hand to do these type of things. But it's just one more example of a place where this is taking place, and we can talk about so many of them all over the world, and have the feeling that it might be true that just the fact that Trump got back into power, it doesn't mean that democracy is just going to crumble everywhere else. But it's true that when the leader of the free world has this rhetoric and is pushing this agenda, there will be some replications all over the world. I mean, after his first administration, we saw so many of his rhetorics and the way that he pushed policy replicated all over. I mean, Brazil is a perfect example. There was also an assault on the capital on Brazil a little bit afterwards. Right? I mean, in that case, Bolsonaro was actually impeached and he will not be able to jump into power, something we did not see in the US. But again, I mean, we might see these sort of politics being replicated in the years to come. And honestly, that's not a world I want to live in. But I think that's why it's important for us, the youth, to be aware of it. And despite where we have our political opinion, to just understand that there is a reason why there's division of powers, and every leader must respect that, because you don't want the other side to do the same when they get on power, no? But Luis, I say, why don't we go into that second part of our discussion today and focus a bit more on the role of the digital tools that we have and how they can be used as a double-edged sword. They could help democratic processes, or maybe they could go against it. So, Luis, going more in focus into the role of the digital tools that now rule the world. Once they were celebrated as this tool for empowerment, and we can think of an example such as the Arab Spring, these campaigns of democracy and openness, but they could also be understood as a weapon of control, from digital surveillance to algorithmic manipulation to even AI-powered censorship. So this could also be a tool for authoritarian regimes to grip on power, to strengthen the grip on power. So I wanted to ask you, this is your field of expertise where you work. How do you see the role of technologies and social media platforms in today's global context and with these threats of democracy we have seen in the last years?
Technology is wonderful. They can be so helpful. And you mentioned the Arab Spring, for example. They use Facebook, they use Twitter, former Twitter, now X, to share the message. That also happened in Guatemala. They thought that they were doing like the Central America's like spring also. But the thing is, like, as almost every tool created, like atomic energy, for example, it can be super good, but it can also be super bad, like horrible. So I think it's the same with tech tools. When you create tech tools that can be helpful for civil society organizations, for citizens, but that also can be harmful when the government has the power, has all the structure of the government, like local channels. They have the power, basically, so they can implement these tech tools. For example, deep fakes. They can spread fake news and disinformation with troll centers, with bots, for example. All of those things can be also used with civil society organizations. But the thing is, like, from our side, from the civil society organizations side, we're not willing to go there because we know that that's not ethical. Whereas Maduro, for example, or Ortega, they can do that and they are not going to care. They are jailing people. They are having like torture centers, for example, in Venezuela. and they just don't give a flying ass about that. So I think it can be like really harmful because you're pushing for something. For example, with deep fakes, you're pushing for something that people who are not that aware of this technology, that they are going to, every lie is going to become a truth. And that's really, really damaging in the short term, and also in the long term. I think one of the biggest obstacles of civil society organization, academia, and also like people who are fighting for a better world is that we do not connect with the people. That can be in the academic field because you talk with very fancy words, and for example, like I've been in so many places with of people discussing about AI technological tools for the people, for the lady who is selling on the streets or for the farmer, but those tools are not getting there. You can create something from your desktop, and that can be a great idea, but it's just not connecting with the people, and people are not using that tool. So that's the problem. That's the gap that we should and we must fill in order for these tools to be more helpful to fight authoritarianism, for example. So I think it's a very nuanced discussion about how you can create a tool, and for people to understand that tool. But the lack of connection, it's way too big in this moment. And I think that's why, for example, the U.S. government also, like we can see like a far-right political party in France connect more with the people, with farmers, with the day-to-day people, whereas civil society organizations, we are not. And we are developing these amazing tools that can be like really, really helpful, but people just don't care about it because they have other needs.
Yeah, no, and lately the message that spreads the most throughout any social media, it's those messages of hate, those messages that play on the feelings, on the emotions, and politics everywhere are taking advantage of that, and that's what they sell. They see every problem of society and they sell it to their electorate from that angle, and then algorithms, they go crazy on it. Once maybe you do a post or a video from the other side fact checking, and then just algorithm does not spread it as you would like. So then the tendency will be that social media will go into one side of the political spectrum, no? And I wanted to ask you, Luis, because I find it so interesting that in any place where there is an autocratic regime, how technology is a tool where citizens can exchange maybe truthful information. I was listening to this interview regarding the occupied east of Ukraine and how citizens there are killed when they talk about what's actually taking place in the world, and how they're using different encrypted ways of communication in order for them to be connected to the actual news and what's actually happening. And I can think of cases such as, let's say, China, that also has this thing they call the Great Digital Chinese Wall, and for citizens not to be aware of what's actually taking place. And it is the role of initiatives such as yours to try to find ways to get the true message into these populations. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more on how do you do that? What's the best approach? How do you actually make sure that this is not something that then these citizens get punished for if they are found with it, right? Because that's the other side of the coin. I mean, you get found with something like this, then you're executed or taken into prison, right? So it is a dangerous game when you're talking about autocratic regimes.
It really is. Like, to be honest, China's example, they really have a very tight knit in which they control the information. Like, they really do control the information, the flux of information. And it's very interesting because we are doing some testing with ChatGPT, DeepSeek. And it was very interesting when you put the name of the, like, Xi Jinping, when you put the name or the Communist Party, DeepSeek is not going to reply to you. Like, the government, really, they do have the control. They are like 1,000 years from us, like from the US, from like everyone else who is making this type of subwords. They control the narrative. And for example, in Ukraine, one of the parts of Ukraine that is like in that the Russians are there, they are putting in place the curriculum, educational curriculum, in which they are erasing the story. So that also has to do with the long-term plan in which they are putting in the mind of the kids this idea that this never happened. And with that, you have also the access to different social networks and TikTok and all of these things, and they are pushing the same narrative. The Russians are pretty good at it. They were like, basically they said, like the US said, like they interfere, putting a lot of news in the US elections, the last one. So it's really interesting because they are doing the same. I was having a conversation a few months ago with someone from Ukraine, and he was telling me about on TikTok, like the kids are watching TikTok and stuff, and also the parents, and how they are trying to erase every part of history of what is happening, and how they are pushing that in different like echo chambers. And that goes to your point, in which like you're part of an echo chamber and then you talk that with your neighbor. So it's like very dangerous, because you're erasing a very huge part of the history, using, for example, something like very you can say like simple as TikTok, but it's really not. Like the algorithm, it's mental. It's like really, really good. So yeah, I think it's really hard to bring all of those things, all of those ideas to the people. And for example, when we developed, Salvador, when we developed GovData, it was a tool. It was like a very fair stage tool, that basically we put the names of the people, their salaries, and type of contract, and the institution they work for. It was huge. Um, we had like 500K visits during the pre-launch. At that moment, it was a different government in power. They hated us. They put everyone attacking us, and then they use the same tool to find cases of corruption. But one of the things that we found out that GovData was very popular, it was because the neighbor, like in your community, you wanted to know how much your neighbor earns. How was his salary or her salary? So a lot of people did that because of curiosity. They wanted to know how much my neighbor does. Or people who work in the same institution, they didn't know the same salary as their partners, so their colleagues. So they went into the app to look for the names, and they say, "Oh, he's making this much." So that part is, and that's like the behavioral part that push you to get to know, like curiosity. Um, so yeah, then the app was shut down, and like it's a different story. But yeah, I think technological tools can help people and also find cases of corruption and empower people, because people get outraged when they see someone is working 4 jobs, but you only have 8 hours per day, like to work, like 24 hours per day, and one of the works is going to take 8 hours. So you have 4 jobs, you're earning like 10K per month, and you for sure you're not working the 4 jobs. So that those type of things help people to empower, or at least be outraged and do something else at the end, because that's not like the app wasn't convenient for the new government. So they said like, no, you cannot post that information. So we had to take the app down. So yeah, I think that's one of the examples that I have, but I also know like the flows of the information, the echo chambers that you are in, and how people is pushing for certain things that they want to put in the subsurface, help to put the idea in the minds of the people. And at the end, that's how you do it. That's how like the elections in 2016 in the US happened. That's how in Ukraine they are trying to erase a very huge part of history. And they're also helping other countries. It's not like the first time that this has happened.
Those comments that you could see on social media whenever the information that you were reading might be misleading was so useful during the COVID pandemic, for example, no? And now the fact that this way of categorizing information that might not be true is just going to change into community notes, as Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg have declared, might even make things even harder to spot for regular citizens. Because I mean, you and I, we might be a little bit more used to it, but when you're talking about the average grandfather, those that share those messages through the WhatsApp chains, I mean, you're just gonna be taking away an easy tool to maybe discourage certain people to share things that might not be true, or maybe just have these people to realize, well, maybe that this could not be true, so let's maybe not share it, and this is going to be gone. So it's one more example of how maybe the social media platforms are not going the path that we would like. But it's nice to hear that at least there's initiatives out there that try to let people be aware of how of where the tendency is going. And for the sake of transparency, I think that every public servant should have this type of information disclosed, but it's not in the interest of the people in power for people to know what they're doing behind the curtains, right? So totally understandable that they want to fight you down and bring you down. But I wanted to ask you, maybe just to start finalizing this episode on the case of El Salvador. I mean, it's a country that we discussed along the episode, but in general, even though the people are really happy with Bukele, that the population rate is the approval rate is quite big. I mean, the institutions are being eroded, and what I find fascinating, Luis, is that people approve that. People approve that. So you're from there, your friends and family that live there. So from that personal experience you had, what do you think that people are actually aware of how El Salvador could go down further in 20 years' time, or is that something that's just not in the imagination of the people at the moment? Like, it's all about those short-term goals of eradicating violence and the problem at the moment without really having in mind what could happen, or is there that idea in their minds, but a problem for tomorrow, I guess?
I I think it's the last part. Like, I think it's not a problem from today. And to play like the devil's advocate, we did have a country in which you had more than 10 people got killed per day. So that's wild. Like, that's crazy. And people were afraid to move from one neighborhood to the other one because you got killed. And that's a reality. People live so afraid of moving, whereas now you are safe. So many sons, daughters, fathers, aunts, uncles, grandparents were killed. So that scar is still here. So when you fix the problem and no one is killing anymore, like you have no gangs, for sure is something that you're going to be grateful for. The president of El Salvador, he has this amazing communications team that it looks like Hollywood. Like every TikTok video, it looks like Hollywood. So when you are offering this solution for the lady, like the common citizen, the citizen who is fighting for a meal for their kids, a roof, they're going to be grateful. Now you can go out and sell on the streets, whereas before you couldn't, because you paid for renta, like extortion, and that was like half of the profit that you made. And now you're not paying that. You can freely go outside and walk and nothing is going to happen to you. So I completely get that, and this is not new. Like in the US, for example, when Bush was in power and the Twin Towers happened, 9/11 happened, a security crisis can bring the suppression of human rights. And that also happened in the US. Like they spy on US citizens. So I think, for example, I was in France, and one of the biggest problems there for the people, like public opinion, was safety. So when you're pushing, the migrants, for example, in the case of France or in the US, that allows the president to do more in order to fix a problem that maybe it doesn't exist. In the case of El Salvador, it did exist and it was erased. So people love him because of that. For sure, hopefully, well, I don't think we're going to face an economic recession now, because that was one of the conversations that a lot of people were having. Like the IMF was going to approve or not, like the loan, they did. And now with the support of the U.S. government back in El Salvador, I think the president is going to have more opportunity to bring more money, and El Salvador is going to thrive probably in a very contradicting scenario of rule of law. But at the end, if that doesn't affect my business, for example, I'm okay. If that doesn't affect my security, I'm okay. So, and that goes into a bigger rabbit hole discussion in which you're saying like, okay, he's giving me results, and the president we elected democratically, he's not giving me results. So what do I want? And that's the hard discussion right now. Like, what do you want as a citizen?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Sometimes that's the dilemma, right? I think in my master's degree, they used to call it the good dictator dilemma. As long as the dictator is giving you results and fixing the problems, you don't care that your civil liberties are going down the toilet. And that's the case. And it's, as you've said, it's such a valid point. When you are facing such a huge security crisis, then you go for any politician that fixes the problem, despite doesn't matter the way that's done. But Luis, I think that we had along this discussion a really insightful points. We went around the world and talked about different examples where there's been a democratic erosion. I wanted to recommend, of course, to listeners that have the privilege of speaking Spanish. We had a really nice conversation with this friend we have in common with Santiago on a similar topic. We went a bit more into that concept of democratic backsliding. We didn't really go into the concrete examples that you and I did today, which was really nice. But again, I appreciated it a lot. Thanks again. It's different time zones we have, you and I. So hopefully you have a nice start of the day over there in the American continent. And well, here in Europe the day is finishing, so it's lovely and sunny, which is not usually the case in Brussels. But thanks a lot, Luis. It was a really nice conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Fabio. This was like really great to have this discussion in a very dark time right now. So yeah.
Absolutely. I can only hope for brighter days in the times to come. But we will leave some links in the description of the podcast that relate to your work, to other episodes that might be relevant for our listeners. And well, happy to listen to your thoughts. Please do not hesitate to engage with our content, and more than happy to listen to you. Have a nice one and see you in the next episode. Bye bye.